Impact, measurement, and management. It's about numbers. It's probably not one of the sexiest topics of today, but it is, as Stefan said. Basically, I come from business perspective, so I'll talk a little bit later about what we do and who I am, but basically I come from the business perspective, and usually you can say, you cannot steer what you cannot measure. And I think, especially in the impact arena, in the impact business, it is a dimension that needs to be thoroughly planned as well as a business plan and to be monitored. And when I talk about monitoring, I just look at first to Carla, because she's coming from 60 decibels. What are you doing and what is your perspective on impact measurement?
Thank you so much, René. And first of all, thank you to Bayer and everyone here for still being here for what we think is a very sexy topic. And I think you're going to be interested in it. But I come from 60 decibels. I would just love to know who knows 60 decibels, so I don't repeat myself too much. There's a group in the audience that knows us and a group that doesn't, so I'm going to be quite brief, but I'm Carla. I'm in charge of our Latin America work. We're growing a lot in Latin America. And 60 decibels is an impact measurement company that came out of Acumen. Exactly. Came out of Acumen around 5 years ago, and it kind of started because there was a need in Acumen to measure impact in a faster, more agile, scalable, and comparable way. And today, and since then actually, we focus in measuring impact by listening to the ones that we consider are the most relevant in the impact measurement conversation, that are the people that experience the impact. So the clients, the customers, the beneficiaries, the users, end users, target stakeholders, are different names. But that's what we consider is the most important, and their opinion is the most important. So how do we transfer this opinion and this knowledge into quantifiable metrics? And that's impact measurement for us, in short. And what we do, and it's quite simple, is apply market research methodologies or mechanisms to self-attribution outcomes. That's what we call it. We don't work with counterfactuals. We value them deeply. We know they're super relevant in many occasions and cases, but they're complex, certain issues in certain social sciences aspects, and they're expensive. And we want to make impact measurement quite fast. But mostly important, we want to transfer these voices into actionable insights. So what we do is we work with surveys, as market research companies do, and we use questions that are drafted in a way to gather insights from the users of products and services, and we apply these questions across the globe. So the proxy to the counterfactual is essentially applying this same question across the globe, and then comparing the performance of one company, one initiative, one project, versus all the other projects in that region, in that subsector, in that business model. And that's the proxy to the counterfactual, and that's the reason why we can conduct this quite fast. And the main objective of this type of methodology, or this type of impact measurement, is not only listen to the voices of the target stakeholders, but ideally transfer them to actionable insights. So we are trying to create value, let's say, in the big puzzle of the social enterprise ecosystem, to the actual companies, NGOs deploying the initiatives. Because as a market research company, essentially, this data is supposed to be actionable. So then you can understand if you're creating a negative impact or a positive impact every year and act on it, beyond having performance numbers, of course. So that's impact measurement for us. And just anecdotically, why we're called 60 decibels, it's because it's the average volume of human conversation. And we value human conversation, but I always joke that in Latin America it's a bit higher, so we should be called like 90 decibels.
That's interesting. This is a fun fact which I also didn't know, that it's named after the human voice, so to say, or the loudness of the human voice. Before we come to Katarina, I think, Stefan, you're working together with 60 decibels. So how did you came across Acumen and 60 decibels, and how are you using the tool and the data?
Well, there's a long and a short story, but for the sake of time, I'll tell the short story. So 60 decibels has been popping up in the realm of social enterprise for a while already, and there was a lot of buzz around it also because it's quite sexy, as we have already managed to kind of get across here. I happen to actually read one of the reports that 60 Decibels generated for AgriFin. So Mercy Corps, AgriFin is a program that we supported in agriculture, so digitization of smallholder farmer products and services. And I opened up this document and I was like, wow, like how is this even possible? Like this is magic. How is this even possible? Because you have not just the testimonials, but you have all kinds of different. I saw the raw data set then also. It's like, okay, this is what you make out of that. All the dimensions of quality of life improvement, but also in a negative way in part. And this is the benchmarking part was really convinced me because I was like, okay, because you give money oftentimes we were talking about the same portfolio, sharing portfolio and pipeline is good, but sometimes there are also organizations that get money from everyone, but they don't actually really perform. And I was really compelled by the testimonials, but the fact of the matter that you can only do it with people who have phone numbers, right? But people answer the phone and they tell you whether or not this is a good product or service. And this is what really convinced me, because if you call them and they're like, which service? Then you probably know, okay, we shouldn't keep funding this project. And there's just a quick anecdote. We did this with Pula, Rose, who you also heard here, in a pilot project. And I mean, Rose isn't here, I think, but there's a good and a bad side to the story. The good side is the results were really good. Like people said, they're really happy with it, and the project went really well and so on. But there was this one element where I was reading, I was like, okay, the service delivery feedback wasn't really that great. This was like more average as a service provider. And you read, okay, it's delayed in payouts, and then nobody answers when you call customer services, something like that. But then, okay, but what's the decision-making factor? It was the other element which said 96% of the people said they have not even nowhere near is there any comparable service available. So you insure uninsured people, and they are extremely happy to have access to this. And this is what we learned through 60 Decibels. So that's what we did. And after the ceremony, I can tell you, and maybe we can touch a little bit upon this also later, of how we carried this into the actual company, impact measurement, which is another story. Yeah. But this is how it started. And that's out of this first collaboration grew another, I think, 6, 8 now, and we're continuing to do this from different angles.
That's interesting. So basically, as you said, actionable insights, and you're doing the groundwork, finding baselines and doing the interviews, so it's a very micro level about impact measurement, so to say. But Ekaterina, I think you have a totally different view on that, because the Institute for Economics and Peace, what is this institute doing, and what is your relationship to impact measurement and management there?
Yes, I mean, I see that we're a little bit more intimate now after lunch. It's like a little bit smaller audience, so we a lot use already this word sexy or sex today and yesterday. We kind of are finished with it, so I am going to also use a little bit a taboo word, especially for private sector. It is a little bit taboo yet, is the word peace. But before using that, I want to a little bit step back and use what's Eddie actually on previous panel from Philips Foundation, who is not here, leaving us intimate, said that we are all here for impact. But what does impact mean? So I've heard a lot of words throughout 2 days on what it means. We've heard a lot about the need and sense of stability. For who the impact is a sense of stability? Okay, no one. We've heard about being impactful is like ability not to make a choice between the school and the food. Is that impact? Yes. We also heard a lot of, in different sense, the word resilience. Is the resilience the impact? So I think there is a lot of interpretation of the impact and a lot of formats that the impact can take. But all of that is impossible without actually the communities and societies being in peace. And when I say the peace, I said it not only in the negative way as an absence of violence, of any kind of violence. When we think of peace, we think of war, of conflict, of violence. But no, it's negative peace, which we also see a lot. What we already heard, that 60 countries are right now in the active conflict, and it's growing. I'm not going to tell you the numbers and not showing very bright future, unfortunately. But there is also kind of a positive peace or resilient peace. It's a system, and that's where we all want to lead. It's a very system approach to how to ensure that communities not fall into violence, and be it internal violence, even domestic violence, how the communities don't fall in the domestic violence, violence against women, country violence, or national violence as well. So we called it as the resiliency framework. Why is it important for the private sector, or for philanthropists and the foundation, and what I'm doing here and not in the UN forum? So I'm also at UN forums, and that's how we started. So we are producing the only one global peace index. So we do rank all the countries by the level of their peacefulness. And we also rank by the level of their resilience, so their abilities to withstand shock. So how we apply this to the investments, to the impactful work, or work of the social entrepreneur. So the question that we're answering is, what does it mean actually to affect or empower 1 million women or 1 million farmers? What does it mean that 1 million farmers are empowered or economically empowered? What does it mean for their communities or for their countries in terms of the structures of their community, well-functioning governments, institutions, the distribution of resources and access to health? What does it mean in terms of the attitudes that people have on each other, acceptance of the rights of others, corruption levels, sound business environment, and the good relations? So we're answering what it actually means in terms of the big pictures on the community level, and then an even bigger picture on the country level. So how does it translate your one investment in women, or in health, or in education? And an example of education, one investment in education translates to 25 in school, one investment in school translates 25% reduced violence in the community and increased resilience. We're not only kind of saying that it's correlating, we're putting numbers on it. Because we have tracked the resilience for a really long time, of over 20 years, we can put number on it in terms of percentage and in terms of the dollar. How much does it cost not to be resilient? And how much does it cost not to be in peace? So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So we're on the actionable insights. So how to we give insights that's kind of impactful on the social level. How to be impactful for your investments.
So it's one topic, but it's a totally different perspective. So it's, as I said, this is the micro perspective. You have the macro perspective. So
exactly.
At least you interpret all the data, and I think it's utterly difficult to measure peace. I think that's one of the aspects when I look at all of the, let's say, framework of the SDGs, there is certain KPIs that you probably can measure, weigh, or whatever. But basically, peace is something which is kind of an aggregated information. And but one question, just out of curiosity, what is the most peaceful country at the moment?
Iceland.
Iceland. Okay. To Iceland. But it's very interesting that you get this kind of ranking. My perspective, by the way, is totally different here, because not totally different. I rely on everything here, because what we do is with Impact, we do the impact reporting communication platform that Bayer is using. But basically, all of the companies that are on our platform, when they check in their impact, so the realized impact, and what later on then is externally audited can be monetized. So we monetize impact in every form, not only CO2 credits, but we do biodiversity, plastic credits, education credits, supporting the global south, etc. So if you got impact, we can monetize it. So we sell this to CSR departments of large corporates, etc., using blockchain technology and NFTs. So this is what we do. So we deeply rely on all these information here. But to come back a little bit about what you're saying, I mean, because one thing you said is the perspective that peace is one factor that needs to be monitored because it is also, it is influencing decisions also to say. Are you evaluating kind of, let's say, levels of peacefulness and stability in a region when you do investments or grants, for instance?
Now we are.
Now we are.
Let's say. So thanks to Pong, who actually introduced the idea of making this an element in our impact measurement framework. We came to the realization actually that what we're doing, so it's more or less the other way around. So we have interventions on more or less probably a systemic level. I don't know where, there's Abby, exactly. I mean, we're doing with her, with Joost, in Kaduna in northwestern Nigeria. So the idea is more like when we go there and when we implement a holistic ecosystem approach towards women economic empowerment in this particular example, and say from a given region 100,000 women have 30% more income, statistically they will not take it to the bar like men would, but rather invest it in education and healthcare, for example, and we can cater to those needs. Then we can have a baseline evaluation of what the peace index is before and what it will be after. So is the stability in the region that we intervene in or that we empower entrepreneurs to carry out or to scale their models, does this have a real effect on people's lives? And then extrapolating from that, you can say, okay, what is the catalytic effect of this intervention ultimately? Because once you have a more stable and peaceful environment, Katja just told us what the follow-on positive effects of this are. And at the same time, we also use 60 decibels to really ask people on the ground to put our ear to the ground and ask them, is this helping you right now? So that we can correlate the voice of the people themselves together with self-reported data from our partners and then with a longer term kind of projected index effect. Yeah.
And sorry to jump in there, but I think on a more macro level, most social enterprises intervene in areas that are not as peaceful, and therefore it doesn't matter how strong the intervention is if the context is actually not supporting for that intervention to continue and scale, and even have a good experience for the people that are experiencing that intervention. So I do think it's super relevant, and I haven't seen it that way, even like for the Latin American space, to always understand the level of stability of the environment from a violence and peace perspective, especially because usually many users of social enterprises are women, and women tend to experience higher levels of violence than men.
Yes, I just want to add, and I'm super happy that Stefan explained actually what we're doing much better than I could explain on the project. So that's already, that lays the best ground. But I want to explain so that when I say stability and peace, I mean not only measuring like again violence, but also measuring resilience. And for that, it's not a rocket science. We also have 8 statistically correlating indicators which statistically correlate with reduced violence. And this include well-functioning government, good distribution of resources, equal distribution, access to systems, free flow of information, high level of human capital, acceptance of rights of others, low level of corruption, sound business environment, and good relations with neighbors. So all these 8 pillars need to work in the system. They all correlate with all the SDGs and all the indicators, ESGs. We have all statistical analysis how that works, but all of them need to work in the sequence. So what we're also saying when we evaluate the resiliency of peace, we're saying also from perspective actually of the trends, we also benchmark a lot and looking at other countries and other communities, how different pillars are evolved, where they're standing, and which pillars could need more attention than others. So it actually can also inform where investments can go from that perspective. So exactly what we're doing with Bayer Foundation, with Stefan and in Kaduna region, it's going to be a really amazing pilot because for the first time we're going to exactly establish the baseline. So we're not just going to kind of monitor it already on historical perspective, which we already done for several impact investors who wanted to see how their investments kind of translated on the higher level, but we're really going to see how it's attributed and progressed on each single pillar of the resiliency. So it's not only about the violence, but all these pillars then correlate directly to the reduced violence. So I want to emphasize that it needs to be the systemic approach, and I think that's exactly what Bayer Foundation is doing and the laying ground for it.
It is interesting because what I feel or what I see when you say it's the first time, so to say, that you're out in the field and collect the data for baseline, do you send people out there? How do you assess this? In what format?
Yeah, no, actually no, we don't. And we do have, we measure the index, we create the Global Peace Index every year, as well as the Resiliency Index every 2 years, again, because some of these indicators needs time for impact, as we all know, so 2 years. We also add the environmental perspective on that, so we actually using the satellites and all the imagery, we look at the environmental indicators, specifically on water and food and population in specific communities. So we basically collect on the violence, we use our intelligence partners that I will not name, to collect the violence indicators on daily basis. So we do have already the data sets. So for Kaduna, even on the level of LGAs, we have more than 250 indicators that updates regularly. We have it from 1990, I think, for Kaduna. I just checked yesterday. So we're going to have a huge trends and look how it evolved in the region. For some indicators, of course, like if there is a need to collaborate and update with the local government as well. I mean, we have a beautiful partners already in the ground, and Mbimbola as well leading that. So we will use that network, and of course, like if needed, send also someone.
Okay, but this is basically the question. So, but what I feel it is a huge big data challenge. I think when you look at all this data, all these regions, and all of these aspects, and then to find this out, and basically to find an abstract formula to do this.
Yes, and again, it is a challenge. But again, I think I kind of share like what we do is what you were saying in the 60 decibel as well. We use a lot to fill some gaps. We do use a lot of benchmarking. Yeah. So there is a challenge. Like some data is missing, especially in some countries and in fragile countries. Okay, let's be very clear. Like a lot of data, or the quality of data as well. And we're not saying that again the quality of data is 100%, but it does give you absolutely the trends and the vision. And we also, again, benchmark it against like a similar communities, similar regions. So if we have the data from another community, we will plug in it in the mechanism. So it's not 100% like, that we can get the cleanest of the cleanest data. It is a work of some work of magic, yeah.
But when you were saying to me, basically we had a chat before, so you're opening an office now, or your office in Latin America, but I feel when I look, you're doing the micro level of impact measurement. So you must have a staff of hundreds of thousands of people to do this. I mean, you're active worldwide. How do you do this?
As a joke, we call ourselves the biggest social impact call center in the world. So as a full-time team, we have around 130 people in 4 countries with an office, and then many other countries remotely. But there is a staff of 1,300 or 1,300 researchers in more than 80 countries across the world. And usually, and this is something super interesting, usually the researchers tend to be women that are mothers and are not being able actually to get another job, but they are super professional women and they actually are the ones collecting the data via phone. 90% of the data collection happens via phone, which is a challenge because we gather data for those who are connected to the system in a way and create data gaps in those who are not. The reason why we don't do it in person is because we're trying for this to be scalable and as replicable as possible, not with us, but with any that wants to do lean data. There are so many open source content that we created when we were Acumen, and now that we're 60 decibels, we keep on creating them. And thank you to Bayer for publishing all of the reports because you can actually learn a lot of the metrics from there. But the challenge keeps on being how do we reach those that are not connected to gather the data and keep the mechanism scalable. And we are piloting different ways with AI and digital data collection and WhatsApp that doesn't need to be connected to the grid. You can receive the messaging as soon as you connect to the grid, but it's still complex because part of the let's say, power of market research is qualitative data. Is having a real conversation with a real human being. And you can tell when and up until now, you can tell when AI is having a conversation. And it's different. You hang up the phone, right? It's like just waiting 2 seconds for an answer in a very robotic way. It's like, okay, this is not a person on the other side of the phone. So we cannot do that through WhatsApp necessarily right now, but the plan is how do we reach more people for data collection? To essentially create more visibility on the impact experiences across the world.
Wow. That's a challenge. This was also my intention. I mean, I've got a couple of projects which are in rural parts in the world, and there is no cell tower, for instance, sometimes, and then you don't get the data there. But yes, it's doable, but I think it's a challenge. But as we only have 3 to 4 minutes left, are there questions from the audience to the panelists? Yes. Just wait a second for a microphone. Yeah, lovely.
Carla, my name is Mark Laurie from Restoring Vision. We are the beneficiaries of perhaps your most recent assessment, just about a week and a half hot off the press. And I'd like to say that we are absolutely delighted with what we received, both the process and the product. Of course, this was an assessment of the impact and other dimensions of our work with healthy entrepreneurs, with Joost and team, together with results for developments kindly supported by the Bayer Foundation. And the process was excellent. Your team was very open while bringing best practices from the many, many other assessments that you've brought. And the product was beyond our expectation. The clarity with which the data was presented and the mix, I think, as Stefan mentioned, of quantitative and qualitative, reinforcing each other and bringing out key points in one another was stellar. So thank you. We are already looking forward to collaboration with other partners and other contexts. My question would be, can you share with us how you are planning to share this methodology more widely? I've been involved in impact measurement with international development for about 20 years. This is the best thing I've seen, to put it very candidly. So I'd love to hear how you're planning to influence the wider field. And again, thanks to the Bayer Foundation for making this possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to share it with the team, definitely. We're trying, and I think the best way to share it is by making reports public, and that's something that not every funder or foundation wants to do or fund. Actually, when I share reports, I tend to share the Bayer Foundation reports because they are so good. It's not only the aggregate report, but actually the report for each of the companies that also agree to share this, which is amazing. And you can see in the reports every single question, actually. So if you want to build a survey, you can also use public reports. But directly to your point, we have 2 courses, open source courses, in the Acumen Academy platform. They are 6 weeks, and they are lean data for social entrepreneurs. And the plan is, even if you don't want to collect data via phone, you can collect the data via WhatsApp because it's cheaper, or in person. There are certain complexities with in person when it comes to bias and different aspects, but it's all explained in those courses. So that's one way. just creating a lot of open source content. But how do we make people know that the open source content is there? And we've tried, like we're trying to go to media outlets, share this, but it's complex. So partners like you, partners like Bayer, partners like other foundations, sharing this publicly doesn't need to be a third party like 60 Decibels collecting this data. Like we can do it because it's third party validated, it helps with fundraising most of the times, but this data is easy to collect. It's not that complicated, and it's not an impact evaluation, it's an impact assessment. It's literally an impact assessment, and anyone can do it. So if you can tell fellow entrepreneurs in different convening spaces that you can do this, anyone can do this, and start collecting outcome data in 3 months time, then that's possible.
I think that's, just to jump in here before we close, I think this is the perfect bridge actually to the continuation of this conversation, because there are two things that I would like to chat about after this whole thing here is over, also to follow on with you. One is, why is this relevant for us and for the company, and how do we do that? How do we translate that into relevance of the foundation's work and social enterprise inside the company's ESG targets? And this actually really works, I can tell you. Thanks also to 60 Decibels. And the second question is, and you just touched upon that, does everybody have to measure everything? So, you know, like, do we do measurement for measurement's sake? No, we don't. And this costs a boatload of money, I can tell you. So it's not a cheap report, because there goes a lot of work goes into this, and we invest in this to gift it to our portfolio, and of course also to brag about it, honestly, because it's pretty cool. But the question is exactly this: how can we make impact measurement simple and accessible for social enterprise, and what guidance works? You know, because there are a million. There's GuideStar and Iris Plus, and then there are the SDGs, and there's like a million different networks and things. And remembering my days in social enterprise, then you sit there and you're like, oh my God, how am I supposed to do this? You know, I don't have time to write reports day and night, but you have to if you want to impress your funders and also to validate your own work. So there's a necessity for this, but it's not like a financial audit. So, you know, nobody can legally threaten you to do impact measurement, but you should be doing it. So this is just a Kickstarter of asking everybody to kind of discuss, okay, what are good solutions? I think these open source courses, that's a resource where you can say to our portfolio, I didn't know that. So that's something that we can share. I can say, here, if you want to learn how to do this, here's the link, you know, if you want to capacitate somebody inside your team to be able to do that. If you have other funders, sources that have an interest in the peace building or stability aspect of your own work, you know, get in contact with Katja. So it's less about us talking about impact measurement and more opening the conversation with the entrepreneurs, because we're also trying to find a solution for this. Not to overburden everybody, but also to encourage to do this, because you can even monetize it through Impact. You know.
What we measure, we treasure.
Yes, impact can be a valuable asset, by the way. So I think you're still with the conference for the next few hours. So talk to us. The time's up. So this was perfect closing remarks. Thank you very much, Stefan, and thank you, Carla. Thank you, Katharina, and enjoy the day. Thank you very much.
René.
Okay.